Shane, we can start with you, and then just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and why should we care?
Okay, well, you don't know where I'm from, so let's not go there. I'm Shane Dewling. I work at Qualcomm. I'm on a software team called AllJoin, and we have developed AllJoin primarily to reduce the friction of getting those 50 billion devices that Anton mentioned actually communicating with each other. I think from a Qualcomm perspective, we see the biggest challenge in IoT is interoperability. You can have hundreds of devices around you. If they can't discover and communicate, then they're literally worthless. And so finding a way to reduce friction is what AllJoin is all about. So that's the product I work on. And obviously, we've, if you guys are aware of it, we've actually taken the open source project and created an alliance, industry alliance around it called the AllScene Alliance. It was established 11 months ago, almost 100 members spanning all industry verticals. And all of these companies are now building product based on the AllJoin open source.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Nate Deanna with Cisco Investments. I'm responsible for our Internet of Things portfolio, both on the venture investment side as well as on the acquisition side. As part of our charter on the investment side, we've been quite active. We actually call it the Internet of Everything, that we can talk more about later on. We have a dedicated fund allocated $100 million of capital for investing in early stage IoT, IoE companies. In the last 12 months, I think we've been one of the more active investors, investing in 18 IoT companies. Most of those have been Series A, Series B, with a few seed investments as well, to really help move the market forward. Some consumer, but much more of our focus has been on the enterprise side, in terms of really helping to enable some of the challenges around security, connectivity, and management.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gavin, and I'm with Comcast Ventures. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mario, for putting this panel together. And I want to say thank you to Bharat at August, Santiago at Orange Chef, and the folks from InHome and Voimotive for showing us such great demos a few minutes ago. My focus at Comcast Ventures is in two areas. I invest in the Internet of Things, specifically the connected home, so devices that improve security and automation, convenience, entertainment, other services into the home for consumers. And I also invest in connected healthcare, so devices for like wearables and some of the things that were alluded to earlier. As a group, we have 12 investment professionals, and I'm based out here on the West Coast. We manage a fund that deploys north of 100 million in capital a year, and we're looking to partner, to invest in, and ultimately to help generate growth and exits for great companies in this space. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dani Behrendt with Honda Silicon Valley Lab. Thank you for hosting us here. So we're the open innovation arm of Honda, the car manufacturer, Japanese car manufacturer, and our mission here based in Silicon Valley is to scout for breakthrough technologies that can add value and transform the user experience in our current products or future products, and through partnerships and rapid prototyping, introduce those quickly into our product line. In IoT specifically, of course, we are connecting cars. So connected car is one of the trends that we will talk during this session. But what interests us the most about this space is that now for the first time, we can co-create the experience. And that's our main interest. It used to be that for us, or for many of the companies that just presented before, those experiences, those products that they represented, the manufacturer was the only one creating the experience. And now we live in a world where that experience with any device can be co-created, and that's really exciting. Thank you.
My name's Brad Leong. I'm with Tandem Capital. We're an accelerator program. We take in companies that are very early on, seed stage, and we work with them to help them try and find product market fit and then go to market. Traditionally, we do mobile software, but now we're interested in hardware, and I'm the hardware guy at Tandem.
Awesome. So, I wanted to let's take a look at trends of 2014. Lots of stuff has happened. The panel represents a diverse gathering of the different verticals, and I guess I'll start with let's start with you, Brad, in terms of, so Brad's at the tip. You're at the very tip of the spear, and when it comes to IoT and emerging stuff, you'll find projects that just are right before Kickstarter, Indiegogo. And kind of what did you see in 2014? I mean, there's things popped really for this industry, but what were some of the trends that you saw?
Well, it's hard to break it down into just like a global trend for all this stuff. I mean, for me, it was just a whole bunch of wearable stuff. Starting with CES in January, it was just like all wearable stuff everywhere. And it was kind of interesting because what I took away from it was that it's actually not really that difficult to make a fitness tracker, and it's going to get commoditized very, very quickly. And I think we're kind of seeing that in wearables first, and then we're going to begin to see that kind of in everything. And that's what's going to make it really, really tricky. I mean, you have these platforms or modules like IMP and Spark and things like that that make it pretty simple to connect anything. I think what we're going to see moving forward is just everybody making everything smart and a lot of things not providing much value. And the real winners are going to be the ones that actually, when the device becomes smart, it actually provides a lot more value than when it was dumb and there's actually something behind it.
Cool. Anybody else have any input to this?
Yeah, if I might add, I would say that I think 2014 was a year of crowdfunding in my mind. So a lot of, let's say, startups that are coming up with great ideas on the hardware side, trying to self-fund their ideas on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, on their own sites. And I think there's been a real distribution in quality and in delivery, to be honest. So I think the market will bear innovation where it bears, and at this point we're seeing a lot of that at the hardware level of the stack. And I think there are companies in these verticals in the home that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. So I'll name a few based on the categories that I focus on. So I think in the home, what are sort of the core use cases? And I think some of the presenters painted some pictures of things that consumers want to see, want to use. I think security and access control is clearly one area. I think IP cameras and video in the home is another. I think lighting is a huge area. We're sort of at the cusp of a sort of secular move from incandescent to LED, and that is one of the more sort of plug-and-play subcategories within the home where consumers can self-install. I think irrigation and sort of water management in the home is another. And I think entertainment is a big one too, right? The Sonuses of the world, if you will. And then finally, we're seeing input control and the use of different types of input formats, whether it's using a wearable, whether it's computer vision to recognize somebody pointing to a light to turn it on, the use of sound in conjunction with mobile devices to access different devices in the home. Of all of those subcategories that I listed, I think access control is the largest. And we're actually very excited about some of the things that August is doing. I think the whole category is doing a lot of interesting things there. But I think remote control, I think access, identity management, and then ultimately enabling consumers to, in a way that is sort of a daily activity to improve the quality of their lives as they enter and exit their home is going to be one of these sort of tip of spear areas.
Well, let's not forget cars. So I think that 2014, looking in retrospect, it's kind of like the rebirth of the connected car. So from Honda, we're both participating in Apple CarPlay platform and the Android Auto by Google platform. So those were launched this year. So which is the beginning of the new era of connected car, we think. Again, it's just we're still very early. I mean, smartphone is barely 7 years old. Siri just turned 3 years old, so it's very, very early, but these are the transformative steps. And one of the things to that end that, for instance, we did today we had just announced a support that as Honda, we just opened a developer studio where developers can just collaborate with us, and we'll give them access to prototype cars and walk them through integrating those apps experiences or co-creating the ones that makes the most sense. Because at the end of the day, one layer that we need to remember, it's great to integrate all these devices, but convenience is great, value is awesome, but safety and security is first and foremost, right? So we're talking about our homes, we're talking about our cars, we're talking about places where we live and places where that really need that layer of security.
Yeah, so as I look at this space, spending time from a VC perspective, To me, it's you follow the money. And if you look last year, about $1 billion of venture capital flowed into IoT companies. Most of that was, I think, very similar to what we saw on the panel earlier, which was connecting devices that formerly were unconnected. So today at Cisco, we're a connectivity company. There are less than 1% of devices that could be connected are connected. And the last couple of years really have been just taking devices like door locks and others that were never designed for the internet and actually redesigning those for connectivity. And that's, I think, across whether it's wearables or home automation is really the connectivity play. As this market evolves, where we're spending our time and putting our money is the future of that. Is once you assume you have ubiquitous connectivity, what can you now do with that data? How do you share that with other machines, with other people? And ultimately, as we spend more time on the enterprise side, how do you eventually drive business outcomes? So not just, hey, it's cool to have this connected and I can turn my light on and off, but how do I actually drive business outcomes? So saving money, increasing operational efficiency and other things, I think is what ultimately turns, the IoT is a relatively small market today into a multi-billion-dollar market longer term.
So I can add to that. I mean, I think I agree with everyone that all the comments that have been made so far. I think one of the key aspects here is that this new industry is not new. It's been around for a very long time. If you look at industrial automation, it's been around for years. Boeing's been flying jets with engines that send back telemetry real time for ages. So this is not a brand new industry. I think it's been reborn in some sense, and it's come a lot from the Kickstarter projects where guys have got more interested in hardware again. We went through a big trend with smartphones where it was all about software, and now we're going back to the hardware. In the startup community, I think that's really what's driving some of this new innovation that's coming in. But I want to touch on some numbers that I think are interesting. This is a number that comes from GSMA. There's about 6.4 billion mobile devices connected to the network today. It's the hugest. It is the biggest network we know of today is mobile. About 7.2 billion people in the world, so just under one device per person. There was a number of 50 billion quoted earlier. I think the number that we use at Qualcomm is 19 billion, so we are kind of on the low end. But even that is, 4 times bigger than the biggest network we know today. So it's almost 3 devices per person is going to have connectivity in less than 5 years. So the trend is going to go very rapidly. But that doesn't make, just adding connectivity doesn't make a device smart, even though it gets that connotation. Smart home is not smart because it's got a bunch of connected devices. So you need software on top of that that creates the smartness. I think that's really where the next trend in IoT is going to come. I think the connectivity is there. It's available now. It's cheap enough. It's how do you create the software on top that makes the devices smart. And I think part of what we've seen in 2014 are some of the issues that currently exist, and I'll touch on one. It's privacy and security. So already we've heard about people's connected toilets being hacked while they're sitting on them, or baby monitors being hacked. I mean, this is the growing trend now, and I think that a distinct and clear focus on privacy and security has to happen for this industry to take off.
So given the explosion of all these connected devices, I've seen that, well, a lot of the data is in the clear. Nothing's really being hardened. So let's look at the security implications and also look at how are all these devices going to actually talk to each other. Because I think the power is not just in 19 billion devices just acting by themselves, but it's 19 billion devices that actually communicate with each other and share information. So what are the current challenges that we have today in the IoT space that must be addressed to at least address the security issues, but also to address the communication between the two?
So I'll take that as a start. So it is a huge challenge. If you look at the current IoT space, there's about 4 or 5 different wireless technologies that exist. Most of them are short-range personal access networks on 802.15.4 is the kind of the primary choice. You've got Zigbee, Z-Wave, 6LoWPAN, a couple of others that are also proprietary. The problem is that none of these are compatible with each other, even though they somewhat fall under the same specification of IEEE. And then just a little bit further up the spectrum, you've got Wi-Fi, which is relatively greenfield. I mean, you can run anything on Wi-Fi, but it doesn't mean it's going to, you have interoperability. Then you span all the way across into broadband, you get into the mobile network. So there's a huge choice of connectivity. And these are all there for a special reason. The personalized access networks offer very low power, which are necessary for a lot of these devices, so they have to be in the ecosystem. But how do you get that device to communicate with, even with a smartphone? So if I've got a Zigbee device, it's not going to connect to my smartphone. It needs something else. So it needs a hub in the home, and this increases cost and complexity. So as Qualcomm, when we took a step back, we said we see a need in the industry for a software framework that sits above the physical layer, so agnostic to the physical layer completely, that provides a ubiquitous way for devices not only to connect, but also to express themselves on the network. Because all these devices have something to say, but also there can be services that are offered across the network. And so that really was the reason that AllJoin was created. It's a software framework completely agnostic to the underlying physical layer, so it allows developers and OEMs to choose whichever physical layer is necessary for the device, but then also sits below the application layer. So it's truly middleware and allows the OEM or the application to developer to continue to differentiate their product at the user experience layer. So that's what we thought was necessary for the market, and that was the reason that AllJoin exists.
Got it. So, Dani, I want to go back to your question on, so how many people have a car that's 5 years older and the map, and Google Maps is probably the way better version than what you have in your car? So, I mean, I would say that the announcements that are coming out today, and plus a lot of the other manufacturers, being able to upgrade and future-proof the in-car experience is probably one of the biggest things this decade's ever going to see. Because then when you buy a car, you could actually be current. Essentially, what is that? How is it going to impact brands? How is it going to impact the consumer and their engagement with the internet and content, et cetera, for these, and also entertainment with the in-car experience? Now that I can actually upgrade and stay relevant, and get the latest version of Flash to play my YouTube videos, et cetera.
Yeah, well, YouTube videos while driving, maybe not so good of an idea, but I think that at the end of the day, we'll make consumers happier, and if consumers are happy, Honda's happy, right? So, and that's the chain, really, and that's the right sequence, actually. So the trick, again, is what experiences from the smartphone world that we are used to have today, which experiences make sense inside a car cabin, addressed when you're not driving, and which experiences make sense when you're driving, right? And that's the trick. So, and safety, again, it's the overall guiding factor. But when it comes to things like maps or any other infotainment technology, fundamentally, it's kind of like decoupling the development from hardware through software, right? Right now, those two layers are coupled, right? And it's long development cycles, right? And what these things like, again, Android Auto or CarPlay allowed is just to start decoupling and start having experiences, modern experiences that everybody wants to have in the car.
Yeah, because what is that future that we look at from IoT is that this is an internet-connected device. It's got a screen. There's a screen here, and I have a 3G connection, and I could, like we have AirPlay today, and I just hey, we'll play it on this screen over here, and let's play it on that screen. I can go to my car, and I just take my phone, and I said, hey, let's play it on that screen, right? And I think that's probably a future that we're essentially going to see, given the power of this device doubles every couple years. But with that, there are some other challenges because I can't really flick it to the refrigerator or the washing machine, but those devices are talking to us. I wanted to ask, let's ask Nate at Cisco. So Cisco's in the fringe of the network. You're on the edges, right? Because from the operator, you guys are really at the last mile for connectivity in most parts, right? So what are you seeing in terms of what's Cisco's role going to be in the future of IoT, right? Are you going to be on the fringe of the network still, connecting these devices to bring them into, backhaul them into the internet. How do you see Cisco's role over the next 5 years in this space?
Yeah, for Cisco, we see it as an evolution. Today, we're forecasting there are probably around 12 to 15 billion connected devices, so mobile devices plus other things. As that number grows to 50 billion, step one is just getting connectivity, and that I think is going to happen naturally. That's going to happen quickly. But the question for us is, as you get connectivity and start pulling data off that, many devices have very unique requirements in terms of what they can do from a power perspective. So just streaming all the data back to the data center is very appropriate for some devices over Wi-Fi that are plugged in. But many other devices, you might actually want to make real-time decisions at the edge of the network. So in the case of control systems, if you're on an oil rig or if you're in a car, there are many cases where you can't actually stream that data back to a data center, do some analytics, and then return that back to the vehicle or to the machine. So actually figuring out an architecture where it's not just connectivity, but then as the data gets pulled out, where does that data get analyzed? Where is it stored? Some data will be stored locally, might be personal data. Other data will go to the cloud, and some combination thereof. And then ultimately, for us on the business side, it's not just getting connectivity and data, but then allowing the business users to make decisions. So we call this Internet of Everything. So it's the things, the data, and the processes, so actually the business processes that are evolving in an enterprise, so you actually make intelligent decisions and get that in front of the people that actually matter. So it's an evolution of that. For us, I think we're still in the early stages of actually providing connectivity, and we'll do that across through the entire stack, from the edge all the way to the data center and back, and then provide the analytics on top of that so people can actually interact and use that data.
And so this is interesting. So all these connected devices are generating terabytes of data.
Yeah.
Why should I care? What's in the data? Why, if I'm a brand, or I'm an entertainment company, et cetera, a mobile service provider, why do I care about the data? What's the importance there? And is that the business? Is that the business of the future? It's no longer selling products. Who cares about that? It's like, well, it's the data behind it for targeting and advertising. So is there something in big data, and is there a future for that? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so let me take that first, and then I'm sure my colleagues will have some interesting perspectives. For us, when you think about it, it's not just the data. The data itself is still worthless. It's actually making operational decisions based on that. So, for example, if you look at a fleet of trains in Germany or in the U.S., the average speed of these trains, GE will tell you this all day long, is about 25 miles an hour across the globe. And that's not the top speed of a train. A train can go 70 miles an hour. The issue is actually all the congestion and actually managing all of the communications between trains, when they can move, when they can't move, and that's a relatively slow process. So if you can actually say, hey, Mr. Train Operator, you can now have your average speed go from 25 miles an hour to 50, that will create dramatic operational improvements, reduce costs, improve delays, and other things that are around that. Same thing is across every industry, whether it's manufacturing, oil and gas, energy. Taking that data and then putting that in the hands of the operators so they make better decisions is where we ultimately see IOE going, and that's where I think the value is beyond the data.
I think Nate shared some really great examples there of use of data in industrial, enterprise, and commercial use cases. I think in the home it's more nascent and it's earlier, right? I think there are less devices, and it's taking time before those devices generate data of the quality and scale that can be used for some of these use cases if you're an enterprise trying to sell or otherwise provide service into the home. I do believe that it's going to come, right? So the early, I would say, beachheads of that are around entertainment and sort of targeted content, so programmatic content, not so much advertising per se, but what you listen to based on who's in the home, what the television shows or your smart TV serves up, what you can consume on your second screen in addition to your television screen. There are a few different constituents in the space. Comcast is one that is thinking about these questions. But I think more broadly, as we think about these devices that are automating and improving security and other elements of our life, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make services stickier beyond the initial hardware sale. And I think that is the part of the golden goose that we're chasing here, which is if you can deliver more value through ongoing services that hardware enables, then whether you're a service provider, a company, or a brand, you're going to have longer lifetime values for those customers. And that's what it all comes back to.
Every time, or not every time, but a lot of times when I hear pitches, there's always a slide, like somewhere near the end of the deck, that just says, and we are collecting all this data, and it's going to be useful in the future somehow. And that's great, and they should have that slide there, absolutely. But we rarely, also keep in mind we're very early stage, but we rarely find that super attractive just because, big data only works if it's big. You need to have a lot of people using your thing before that becomes that meaningful as an advertising platform or as something else. So if that's a long-term goal, that's awesome, but there certainly has to be something more than that in the short term to monetize. I think kind of the broader concepts that I think everyone was touching on was just that connected hardware is interesting because you then have a consistent touch point with the consumer and you can do something with that. Often we think about the initial hardware sale just as a way to subsidize the user acquisition cost, and the benefit of the company and revenue comes from something later.
I mean, being part of the conversation is highly important, right? So after all, that's what marketing is, right? So, so the analogy of food labels, right? That tells you the calories and the composition of what you're about to eat. You make it. That's just data, right? In itself, well, it's great, but not too much. You cannot do too much with it. But once you decide what you want to eat, then you make a decision based on the data that you have in front of you. So likewise, that's why it's so exciting, right? So we start seeing it in fleets where there's apps where say, well, that acceleration just costs you $10, right? And then, well, driver just behaves differently, right? So just having the data, you can make more informed decisions from a consumer, right? So from a brand or the provider of that big data, well, you can be part of the conversation, I think. That's just a very meaningful first step.
Let's go to the creepy home future of the home. and it's a connected home. So right now we have Nest, and Nest has got microphone, it's got some things that you probably don't even know exist on this, and they're listening. So there's this creepy future that can exist. So it may be creepy, it's creepy today, but tomorrow it may not be so creepy. But this goes to Gavin. It's like, you have a set-top box in every home. You have tons of data. You're an internet service provider. You know where everyone surfs, and how. So and you know what people are viewing. How does Comcast right now currently use that big data? Because it is a large data set. And how are you using it today to improve services, network, et cetera? How are you guys using that to better your business?
Yeah, sure. So let me try and address that by talking about the different services and how data plays into kind of the core triple play bundle that we in San Francisco may be purchasing as consumers, whether from Comcast or a competitor. So for video, for internet core broadband service provision, and then for digital voice if you have that. I think that the story is slightly different for all three. And I think the fourth layer that sits on top of that is the connected home or home automation. And there's a managed security product called Xfinity Home, which we also offer in that space. I'll talk about the first three. So I think data and security around data is extremely important, right? So if you take kind of one example of that, within, say, just device management, identity management, and parental controls. I mean, this is something that you can currently, set through your set-top box, and for all the devices that consume media streamed to, those endpoints using the Wi-Fi network in the home, you can say, for this individual at this time of the day, you can only show this type of content. And so, that's just an example of the use of data and the use of identity management to personalize access. But I think more broadly, for entertainment versus for security, you see your Netflix queue, you see your Comcast queue, you see your Amazon video queue, and you see how that's getting better with greater usage. So I think, the use of data and sort of privacy considerations associated with that span a spectrum based off of, at the end of the day, are we talking about a security situation or are we talking about a content experience? And I think I have colleagues much more knowledgeable than I on issues around data security that look at privacy and the considerations around that very closely for all of these use cases. I think in the case of the connected home and home automation, so you mentioned Nest, there are other smart thermostats out there. So whether it's for energy management or lighting, energy saving, or water saving, or monitor my baby's room to know if from a health and sort of safety standpoint, they're resting well, or whether it's about sort of food and composition of what you eat. I think there's again a spectrum of I would say necessity of focusing on concerns around privacy. So a connected oven by itself, or a connected tray of eggs that will tell you if you're running low on eggs. I think individually, the data off of that to consumers is important, but perhaps less important to be secured. Whereas for a thermostat, for a lock, for your home security system, I think we would all agree that the bar is higher, right? But I think as platforms are converging, and some of the things that were described earlier around different connectivity platforms that are allowing systems to talk to each other, in conjunction, knowing that the temperature is low, that your eggs haven't been refilled, and your oven hasn't been turned on, could be inferred as someone's not home, and that could be information that could be used by a would-be perpetrator to burglarize your home. So in the combination of these data streams now become important, and so that's an area that we're focused on for potential investment, but also one that I think as a service provider you have an obligation or responsibility to make sure is well taken care of for consumers. I will say as just one final sort of corollary in the wearable space that security, privacy, and user authorization, OAuth, if you will, has fallen to a very low common denominator, which is Facebook login, Facebook Connect login, right? And that's just simply not secure in many different ways. And so I think consumers are willing to give up some degree of privacy and security in return for value. And in the case of activity tracking, that value is X. In the case of securing your home and delivering security-related services, the value is 5, 6, 7X. So I think the thought needs to be given, depending on where you play in the stack, and as a service provider, offering those services in the home as to where you draw the line and what bar you hold yourself to.
Cool. So we got one more question, and let's talk about 2015. So, and we'll go down the line here, starting with Shane. It's like, what's your predictions for 2015? What are you going to see that's going to be really relevant in the IoT space?
Yeah, so definitely I think more products will roll out in 2015. I think we've seen a few in 2014, but I think the spike in products are gonna definitely increase in 2015. Consolidation, for sure, and I think a massive foot forward by the operators and service providers. I think ultimately, these guys like Comcast are the ones that are going to certainly start monetizing services. There haven't been enough devices in the marketplace to warrant it today, but I think 2015 will start moving in that direction. So that's what I see.
Cool. Nate?
Yeah, two things 2015 from my perspective. One is, as I mentioned, with only 1% of devices connected, I think there's a long tail of new devices that will become connected, and that really requires a different way to connect. So we're just now seeing in the early days of ultra long range, ultra low power wireless standards that are emerging to really manage devices that have no power or very little power. And that's really where you open up a whole new set of use cases outdoors and indoors. That's part one. And two is, just given all that data, is actually not just doing the big data part, collecting it, but then doing much more of the analysis. And companies that are much more thoughtful of it in the enterprise or even in the home, where it's not just programming very specific rules in your home, but actually having a much more thoughtful way to auto-program those and provide the experience without having to be a programmer.
Yeah, I would say that the 2015 for me is going to be the year of Bluetooth mesh and more ubiquity in Wi-Fi for devices that currently don't have the ability to operate, with those sort of power and latency sort of thresholds that the Wi-Fi currently sort of requires. Meaning, right now it's sort of the realm of IP video, IP cameras, sort of high bandwidth use cases in the home. I think, Wi-Fi is going to be ubiquitous for everything that, it sort of spans from kind of Zigbee-based sensors today through to, I would say devices in between. And I think Bluetooth and Bluetooth mesh is also, I think, a new standard that we're going to start to see more devices connect to.
Yeah, I think 2015, on the one hand, we're going to see, I totally agree with you guys, more products, more implementation, more use cases. But on the other, what we're going to see in 2015 is because this is still a very Silicon Valley-centric conversation, so 2015 is the beginning where this conversation starts to permeate the rest of the country, the rest of society. It's starting to just permeate the rest of the consumer market, not only the early adopters, but the rest. That's how I see 2015.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everyone. Everyone touched on some good ones. It's actually the Bluetooth one is really interesting, and it's kind of interesting that we just talked about that because that's one of really the big enablers of all of this is Bluetooth Low Energy and the fact that every cell phone now has that and can talk to stuff. I mean, my bet is for sure on Bluetooth and now Bluetooth Mesh as the main wireless protocol that everything will connect with. Kind of what I said at the beginning, just that we're going to see a whole bunch of stuff, pretty much everything that you can think of that has electronics in it. They're just going to throw a little wireless chip in there, Bluetooth Low Energy chip in there. And a lot of them won't provide any value, really, or very little value over when they were dumb products. And then we'll see some that are actually really, really interesting, and those will be the ones that will be winners. I think a lot of the ones that will be winners will actually not just be extensions of old products, but actually kind of new ideas, more than just throwing a wireless chip in something that we already know about.
Like my teddy bear or something like that. Well, give a round of applause. Thank you very much, everyone.